Garrett's poem, seriously, was so creative and so playful and connected to each one of us. And you might think that my field, science and engineering, is the complete opposite. Rigid equations, no room for creativity or subjectivity at all. But as you already know, to do research in any field, you have to be creative. To discover something new, you have to reach beyond the traditional box of what has already been done. And so my talk today will focus on one way that I think we as researchers, you in the audience, can be more creative. And that is through interdisciplinary collaboration, breaking disciplinary boundaries. Here's the story of interdisciplinary collaboration as I see it. First, we combine expertise, pooling our talents and knowledge, and then, through the lens of many different methods and perspectives, we can perhaps innovate better than any one individual. And finally, this may allow us to broaden our impact, not only to our colleagues, but also hopefully to the wider world. And so to share with you this story of interdisciplinary collaboration as I see it, I'm going to use as a case study my current research on artificial photosynthesis. I collaborate between two labs currently, a chemistry lab at Cambridge and a physics lab at Imperial College London. And together, James, Erwin, and I are trying to answer the question, how are we going to power the planet in the future? So today our society runs on fossil fuels that pollute our planet and the air we breathe. So when they run out, or perhaps hopefully sooner than that, we'll need alternatives. Now, most renewable resources, solar, wind, they generate electricity. But today's vehicles, most of them can't run on electricity. For example, if you put a battery inside a large plane, it weighs the plane down more than it powers it, and that's because it's not energy dense enough. So the grand challenge we want to solve in our lab is, how can we produce an energy source that is energy dense enough to replace fossil fuels? And can we do this renewably? Fortunately, nature provides an answer to this question. In the lab, we're trying to create an artificial leaf. Such a technology copies nature's brilliant solution of photosynthesis to create dense fuels from sunlight. And so to tell our story of collaboration, let me take you back to 2010 when Erwin first started thinking about this problem. For inspiration, he outlined what it is that plants do, and this you know. They breathe in carbon dioxide, drink in water, and use sunlight to transform these materials into food, which is just putting the energy in a physical form that we call fuel. To achieve this, to create an artificial leaf, would be to achieve a holy grail of science. And so to map this scheme into a prototype artificial leaf device, Erwin chose the simplest fuel possible, which is hydrogen gas. It's a transparent gas like the air we breathe, and it's energy dense. Ultimately, we would look toward creating carbon-based fuels that are even denser. And so how to create an artificial leaf that makes hydrogen? Well, Erwin is a chemistry researcher. He put his thinking cap on. Erwin and I are both chemistry researchers, and chemistry researchers like to think about molecules, so here's an example of one. I've always thought they kind of look like Mario Goombas, and just like the Goombas, molecules have personalities and specific behaviors. And so knowledge about those behaviors allows us to design new molecules that are useful, everything from plastics to medicine. Here's another molecule. It's the one that we want to make, hydrogen. And you can see that it's just two single hydrogens attached together, and that's hydrogen fuel. So using his knowledge of molecular behaviors, Erwin designed a new molecule, a new useful molecule, to attach two single hydrogens together. And this we call a catalyst. Here's the catalyst that Erwin and his Cambridge team developed. He plopped it into a glass of water and found that it worked. It took two single hydrogens from water and then, using sunlight energy, combined them to create hydrogen gas, a breakthrough. But then he was stuck. In order to make his catalyst absorb more sunlight, Erwin realized that he needed to understand the internal physics of how the catalyst worked. And it was something that he couldn't do on his own. Here's where James enters the story. James is a physicist with an ultra-fast laser. He imagined that he could use the laser to understand the behaviors of catalysts that are very small. But at the moment, his laser platform was empty, so individually, both of these researchers were stuck. When they collaborated, James and his postdoc Anna used the laser light as a substitute for sunlight, shining it on the catalyst. Behind the catalyst, they placed a detector to pick up the optical signals that the catalyst gave off, essentially high-definition shadows. And from these optical signals, they were able to determine exactly the molecular motions of the catalyst in order to improve it. So in this first stage of the story, James got to apply his laser, and Irwin was eager for James's physics expertise. Sometimes coming together from different fields is the only way to make strides towards solving the larger challenge. Using this knowledge, the researchers realized that in order to absorb more sunlight, they would need to expand the actual design of the device and therefore expand their team. They hired postdocs and students from a variety of areas, and I joined in 2010 to contribute my background on solar energy. And also I wanted to play with the laser, I'll be honest. Well, and learn how it works from the experts. So within a year, the team was able to develop a prototype artificial leaf component. And this was actually really a breakthrough. And the only way they were able to do it was by combining different areas of expertise. So this is a schematic of how the artificial leaf works. It has 3 components. First, a dye. That was contributed by the photophysicists, the experts on how to absorb sunlight. And they developed a dye that would do this efficiently. Next, they needed to pass the sunlight energy from left to right, so over to the catalyst. And for this, they hired electronics gurus. They used a semiconductor, much like the semiconductors that would be found in the cell phones in your pocket, for example. And then finally, the catalyst at the end was integrated, and that was from the chemists. So what does such a device actually look like in the lab? This is a picture of a beaker. We've dropped in our green artificial leaf component and turned on the sun. Well, it's the UK, so we turned on a lamp. And what you see immediately is bubbles forming where they could be, and those are hydrogen fuel, where you could take them off at the top and then use them as fuel. This innovation stage of the story reminds me of an old saying, 2 nerds are better than 1. We took, I know, I'm sorry, I'm not as creative as Garrett. We took components, best practices from different areas of science and combined them to create something novel and beautiful. Ultimately, the artificial leaf could supply the energy needs for a household in the developing world, and hopefully here as well. Here's how it would work. First, the machine splits water to create hydrogen. Hydrogen is an energy vector that can be stored much like a battery, so you can save it for when you need it. And then when you need it, you just plop it into a fuel cell, which is a currently known technology to convert hydrogen into electricity. And then with electricity, well, electricity is power, literally. As you know, energy provides access to many of the other development goals, things that we take for granted here in the developed world. I invite you to try to think of something that you did today that didn't involve electricity. And so this global vision for the artificial leaf leads me to the third point, which is collaboration allows us to broaden our impact. As researchers, we're all working on one tiny but crucial aspect of a larger problem, a larger challenge that is easy to lose sight of if you're isolated in the lab or the library. But by working with others from different fields and different stages in the development process, we can more clearly see the path that our work will take toward the wider world. I know that we can be creative by coming together across disciplines to develop solutions to grand challenges. One day, 3 years ago, I decided to dedicate my research career toward helping solve the energy crisis. And since then, I've had the great pleasure and privilege to work with so many passionate scientists and engineers collaborating across disciplines on projects from next-gen flexible solar cells to energy-efficient smart windows. But what most scientists won't tell you is that science is a low-probability enterprise. I can't tell you how many times my experiments failed, and I felt like a failure. I know I would not be standing here before you today if it weren't for my incredible mentors who taught me that failure is a necessary part of the discovery process and who helped cultivate in me the collaborative mindset that I have today. So in order to share them with you, I asked my mentors what advice they would give to young researchers who are interested in collaboration across disciplines. Nikolai said to think broadly about questions in nature. Tackle whatever challenge it is that you're passionate about, not just the small hole that needs to be solved in your own discipline. Emily reminded me not to be afraid to ask questions. To grow as a researcher, you need to be open to ideas from new fields. And then finally, Jeff told me that, he reminded me that interdisciplinary collaboration is a lesson in humility. You have to check your ego at the door in order to collaborate with experts from other fields. But if we can do that, if we can leave behind institutional politics and interdisciplinary barriers, we can come together to achieve a common goal. And so, in conclusion, I want to ask you, everyone in the audience, in big ways and in small, to be creative with your projects and talk to others outside of your own discipline, at work, in school. In keeping with today's theme, I imagine an interwoven network of great minds coming together to solve the world's challenges, and I invite you to be a part of this global team. Thank you.